So, have you noticed this? You go to open a bottle of water or soda, and the cap, it doesn't come off anymore. Kind of weird, right? Maybe a little annoying? Well, there's a really interesting story behind that little change. So, let's get into it. Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about. You twist the cap, you're ready for a drink, and nope, it's just hanging there by this little plastic leash. I bet the first time it happened, you thought, huh, did I break this? But no, it's not broken at all. In fact, it's a super intentional design, and believe it or not, there's a huge story behind it. So let's break it down. On the one hand, you've got the classic cap we've all used for decades. You know, the one that was super easy to lose or drop on the ground. And on the other, you have this new design. The official name for it is a tethered cap. And the whole point, obviously, is to keep it stuck to the bottle. That means it's less likely to become litter, and it stays a whole lot cleaner. But, and this is the important part, the reason for this change goes way deeper than just a little bit of convenience. All right, let's get into the real meat of it. Because this whole thing, this innovation, it wasn't really about making your life easier. It was about tackling a massive environmental problem. And it all comes down to this number right here, 10%. Now, at first glance, 10% might not sound like a huge deal, but wait until you hear what it stands for. It's pretty staggering. So that 10%, get this, a huge survey by the European Union found that bottle caps alone make up 10% of all the plastic litter found on their beaches. Just these tiny little things. They're one of the most common pollutants out there in our oceans, and they do some serious damage to marine animals. So with that kind of data, you can bet regulators started to pay attention. And they did. Back in 2019, the EU put out this major directive all about cracking down on single-use plastics. And buried inside that directive was a key rule that just kicked in July 2024. For a whole bunch of drinks, the plastic caps have to stay attached to the bottle. Okay, so now there's a new law and a huge environmental problem to solve. What happens next? Well, the engineers and designers got to work, trying to come up with something that would actually work for everybody. And this is what they landed on, the tethered closure. Now, the genius here isn't just that the cap stays attached. The real goal is to make sure the cap and the bottle get recycled together as one single piece. Because when they're together, the chances of that little cap actually making it through the recycling process go way, way up. And look, I know it just looks like a simple piece of plastic, but don't be fooled. These things are seriously engineered. They're built strong enough that you can't just rip them off by accident. It can take over 30 newtons of force. They're reliable, you can open and close them at least 15 times, and they're designed to open up to an angle of more than 180 degrees. And there's a very, very good reason for that. This quote, which is literally from the manufacturer's notes, is just perfect. Don't let your customers become clowns. I love that. It's exactly why that 180-degree angle matters so much. It folds the cap all the way back so it doesn't smack you in the nose or poke you in the eye when you're trying to get a drink. It's a tiny detail, but it makes all the difference, right? And that's a great example of how this whole thing works. The main reason for the change was the environment, for sure, but the final design ended up having some pretty cool, unexpected perks for us in our everyday lives. I mean, think about it. First off, you can't lose the cap anymore, ever. It's always right there. This makes it so much easier to open and close with just one hand, which is awesome if you're, say, driving or out for a walk or just juggling a bunch of stuff. It's just a simple, smart design that pretty much anyone can use, from kids to seniors. And then there are the hygiene and safety benefits, which are actually huge. The cap never has to sit on a dirty table or, even worse, fall on the floor, so way less chance of picking up germs. And for anyone with little kids, this is a game changer. Since the cap doesn't come off, it's no longer a choking hazard. That's a big deal. So what's next? Because this little cap is really just the beginning of a much bigger story about sustainable packaging. Well, the next big evolution is the material itself. We're talking about caps made from plants instead of petroleum. Yep, companies are now deep into developing what they call bio-based resins. The goal is to get away from fossil fuels and start using things that grow. And right now, it looks like there are two main ways they're doing this. The first approach uses stuff left over from sugarcane processing to make a plastic that's 100% bio-based. The other path is a bit more flexible. It uses all sorts of bio-waste, think used cooking oil, or even byproducts from the paper industry. With this method, you can mix in any percentage of bio-based material, but it does require some special certifications to make sure it's all traceable.
And it's not just about the plastic itself. The companies making these caps are also looking at their own carbon footprint. Check this out. Just by switching their factories in Europe over to zero-carbon electricity, they've already cut the carbon footprint of every single cap by 15%. That's a pretty significant drop.
So here's the bottom line. That little cap, the one that maybe bugged you at first, it's so much more than just a design tweak. It's a physical symbol of this massive shift that's happening. It's a direct response to some scary environmental data, it's driven by new laws, and it's pushing engineers to come up with some really clever solutions. And that kind of leaves you with a question, doesn't it? The next time you notice some small, weird change in an everyday object, maybe pause for a second. Ask yourself what the bigger story might be. What other simple things that we use every single day are just waiting for a smart redesign that could have a massive positive impact? It's definitely something to think about.